Good evening again. Welcome as we begin the budget process for this fiscal year. Our guests this evening are representing Otis Library, Mr. Nick Fortson and Mr. Bob Farwell. John, do you want to begin with anything? Or? Sure.
Thank you. I basically said my summary all night, but as you can see on the calendar for tonight, I have Otis Library, the public schools, public works, and then human services. We're going to start with Otis Library, and he's right to my right. His last budget.
My last one, yes.
It's a good one. So, yeah, it's always right. Sorry, I was a little banter. So Otis Library, we've tried to increase their budget somewhat above some of the other budgets in the previous years. We've noticed that they've lagged behind in salaries and other areas of the regional scheme of libraries, and because of that, they sometimes have a difficult time recruiting new employees and then holding on to employees they have together. So hopefully these increases have helped them become a little more competitive. The line item page is 115 for the Otis Library. It is just one line item. When we reduce or add to the budget, we're just adding to that one line item. And I now will turn it over to Otis Library to discuss their budget, and then we'll take questions.
Okay. We have asked for a modest increase, which I think will help us keep up with inflation. And
Is the mic working?
Excuse me, Bob, could you tilt the mic up so, there we go.
how's that?
Better. Much better.
Okay. So, as I said, that will help us keep up with inflation and help us to retain the staff that we have. For the first time in recent memory, we actually have been able to recruit for all positions at the library, and the help of the city allows us to keep those employees and keep them happy. We have already achieved a great deal this year, and I think it's worth noting that, as I did in the request, that we are one of only 6 libraries in Connecticut that will be working on a program with Libraries Without Borders, which is funded through the state library to ensure that programs and services are being appropriately dispersed amongst the various populations. So the other items that we will be working on, I mentioned in the narrative the bulletin collection. We have submitted a grant for $28,000 to help us digitize that so that it will be more available to the public. We also talked about story walk planning. That has been completed, and we have been able to restore all of the services and the hours that we lost during the pandemic. So everything that was before and that we've been able to get back into production. visitation has been up, and we're up to 43,000 visits in the last fiscal year, up from 25,000 the year before, and that is also reflected in our circulation and in our programming. So I would be more than happy to answer whatever questions you have without going on ad nauseum.
Thank you. Other questions from members? President Pro Tem, please.
This might be a question for Josh or John. So I'm looking from the 2021-22 budget was $1.1 million. Actual was about the same amount, $20 difference. And then 22-23, the current budget, $1.177 million. Is that $77,000 increase? Was that ARPA money that was added to their budget last year, or was that out of the general revenues?
That was from the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Alderman Singh.
Thank you. So any specific programs that you added this year? Because I think as a city has been very consistent from past 3 years, giving 7% raise on the budget every year. This time you're asking 10% increase. And I understand inflation and other factors. But is there any specific programs that has been added this year which were not in past year?
Yeah, there have been more programs. First of all, we introduced lawyers in libraries, which was not previously part of our normal programming. We've also become a hub for libraries for the blind, so that returning materials, being able to take out the recorders that allow people access, audible access to tapes. That's another program that we've introduced. We've also expanded our outreach to our home patrons, which previously was called homebound, but some people prefer to get their materials at home, so we don't discriminate on the basis of whether you can get to the library. Is it convenient for you, and is it a service that we can provide? So we now have, depending on the time of year, 22 to 27 people who receive visits, and I think for March we distributed something close to 300 items to those people. The other program that had been fallow and now has picked up again and it's been really very well patronized, our technology classes up at the senior center. That has been revived, so we're there once a week. And in the evenings, we also offer a similar one-on-one program at the library. And those do serve two different audiences. The audience at the senior center is usually an audience that already has some knowledge and they're looking for specific help with a particular kind of item that maybe somebody bought them without thinking that they might not know how to use it, as opposed to the people who come to the classes at the library, who are more often than not people who need a basic service. And that basic service could be, how do I fill out a resume online and do it in a timely fashion so I'm not cut off? It could be as simple as, how do I use a Word document? How do I use a spreadsheet? So all of those things have been identified as things that perhaps were available prior to COVID, but did not have the staff resources available to do them at the level we wanted. So there are those considerations as well.
Okay. And just one more thing. So as more and more people are reading books online, right? So have we created any kind of portfolio from Otis Library that people can sign up and they have some accessibility of those online books? Or if Otis Library have some online book collection?
Yes, yeah, we actually have expanded the availability of our online offerings in response to people expecting it. They've become comfortable with it. We have a program called Hoopla, which is funded by the library, plus another one called Overdrive that is part of our consortium fees. And they're both, interestingly enough, the availability is still not damaged our core audience for books. So the books are still going out in larger numbers than they did even 6 months ago. So we try to prioritize and to figure out what it is the public wants. And I might add parenthetically that part of the work with the Libraries Without Borders is to make sure that we are providing those services. So there's a whole, aside from implementation of programs, there's a whole community survey that's part of that collaboration. So if there is something that we're missing, we will learn about it. And hopefully we'll also learn that what we are offering is being embraced by the public.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further questions? Alderwoman Gould.
Good evening, and thank you for being here tonight. What will you do with the proposed increase? Is that just going to keep staffing levels, or will you be able to be adding any new programs to the library with the increase to your budget?
Well, I would be dishonest if I didn't say that some of it could help with our salaries. We do want to expand our security. We want to ensure that we have security at those times when people are most likely to be patronizing the library. We do have security now, but candidly, we'd like to expand that and ensure that there is someone there who will assist the public earlier in the day as well. As far as programs go, yes, that would be very helpful. The salary portion of the digitization project is not covered by the grant, so that would also be extremely valuable in allowing us to keep pace with the demand. So that would be another. That's another program that I can certainly qualify as benefiting those two specifically.
Okay, thank you. And just as an aside, congratulations on your upcoming retirement.
Well, you can ask my wife about that.
Well, no.
I'm not sure she's so crazy about it, but
Congratulations anyway.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Further questions? Joe, please.
Good evening. Thank you both for being here tonight. It's always a pleasure to see you. I have just one question. If your increase in your budget were to be limited to 2.5%, how would that hinder what you plan to do?
I'm sorry, if it were limited to.
It would limit. So, and I know that's an abstract question. So, if we were to limit your increase in your budget to 2.5%, so that would be roughly, I would say about $25,000 increase versus what's being proposed in this budget. How would that impact the changes that you are intending to make?
2.5%?
Yeah, so let's talk about it in real dollars. So about $25,000 versus what you are.
Joe, I would say that it might qualify as better than a stick in the eye, but it's not going to get us anywhere. We've already seen we've already seen an enormous increase in our utility costs. You know, that's money's got to come from somewhere. We're using the monies that we have that are specially allocated for specific purposes, like our book fund and so forth. And a 2.5% increase is, that would hardly even allow us to maintain the status quo. I wouldn't even say categorically it would. I mean, we'll be back where we were, trying to nickel and dime, not able to provide the staffing levels we need, not able to provide the benefits that any prospective employee is going to either demand or expect when it comes time to fill positions. I think it would be categorically detrimental to the library and its ability to maintain its status as a community asset. I don't see how we do that.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Further questions? I just have a brief one. Monday through Friday, right now, except when you have events on weekends, that's when we'd find the doors open on Saturday, or is it 6 days a week now?
It's 6 days a week. It's Mondays and Wednesdays, we're open from 9 to 7. Tuesdays, we're open from 9 to 5. Thursdays, we do close at 2. And that's not a, that was not a capricious act. It was based on the software we use to chart the ebb and flow of attendance. Thursday afternoons were historically a very poorly patronized period. And by moving that, we were able to open earlier and also to expand the hours for the weekends and make sure that we could keep them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, Alderman Singh.
Just one quick comment. So, of course, COVID has changed a lot, and I can just see with the numbers. So technically, the ask or the request is almost 30% more than what the actual budget was in 2019 and 20. That's a very considerable number, but do you think, are we back on track this year? Have we recovered from the, people coming in our doors?
People are coming in the doors. I think if you were to poll any member of our consortium, they would tell you that things are getting better, but we still have to work to get people to come back. I mean, the numbers, the percentages of increase over the last fiscal year have been good, and we like to see them there, but it's still a rebuilding process. We're getting 300 visits a day, and I'd like to see that continue to grow. But you have to have the funding to provide the staffing, provide the programming, and provide the materials the public expects to see. Otherwise, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The library is not meeting the expectations of the public, and as a result, we are not a priority. And given what we've been able to do since we reopened, the number, I don't think there's been a year since Otis Library reopened to the public that we have not been recognized with some award for the quality of what we do. Now, maybe there are other groups who can say the same thing, but I know categorically we can. And those are not handed out frivolously. They're because we are a community asset, and that's what I've worked the last 18 years to ensure. So my express hope is that the support that's been given to the library for the past several years will continue and will be a reflection of the real value that the library provides for the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please, go ahead, Nick.
My name is Nick Fortson. I'm the chairman of the Board of Trustees. Just one thing I want to make a comment about is that, yes, technology has made a difference in how we do service. But one of the things that the board has done is that we went out and we talked to people in the community, individuals, and we talked to groups in the community. And Otis Library has a very high positive image in the community. The Otis Library, believe it or not, does a lot for the image of downtown Norwich. And it's all about the program that we give. At any point in time when you go to the library, you'll find the elderly, you'll find youngsters, you'll find people who grew up in Norwich, and you'll find people like me who moved to Norwich a few years ago. And the perception is that Otis Library is a safe community space in downtown. So it really helps the image of downtown. Now, Bob talked about security. We just talked about that. My understanding is that we've got a security guard that just left us. So, you know, the salaries are real important because we've got to be competitive because they could go somewhere else and we don't have the security. And that security is very important because when people go to that library, they know that it's a safe place. Last thing I'll make a comment about is in terms of the numbers. A couple of weeks ago, I went to the library and I was shocked at the number of people there. And the place was just filled up with people for the VITA, the volunteer income tax program. So the library is very, very important. It is very, very important to the citizens of Norwich, and it's very important to the image of downtown. When you go to the library, you're there for healthy reasons. You're there to learn, you're there for some social activity, and for the demographics of Norwich is real important. There's a lot of people like me in Norwich that are senior citizens. I'm 66 years old. We go to the library because we can sit there, relax, enjoy ourselves. You've got youngsters that go there. We also talk to some of the kids at the schools about the library. They love the activity at the library, but it's important to keep it safe. And so you can't keep it safe if the budget gets cut. You don't have security there because when people think of the library, they think of it as a nice, safe community space in this great town of Norwich.
Thank you. Further members? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And let me just make this last comment. Mr. Mayor was the one that had me move to Norwich. You remember that. He spoke to me for 2 hours at the baseball stadium, and I said, I got to move to Norwich. So thank you, sir, because I love the town.
Thank you all.
Thank you. The
a good
next
evening.
budget that the council will be reviewing is the Norwich Public Schools, and their budget is on page 111.
Please come forward. There are seats at the table, microphones available for you. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, anything you'd like to begin with, or do you want to?
No, I think we
Allow them to,
We
okay,
can go directly to.
great, thank you.
Superintendent.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mayor Nystrom and President Pro Tem DeLucia, members of the City Council, Manager Solomon. We have Board of Education members here, Chairman Robert Aldi and Kevin Saitani, and of course our community members. I'm Kristen Stringfellow, Superintendent of the Norwich Public Schools, and it is my pleasure to be here this evening along with my colleague Robert Serpensky, who is our Business Administrator, to present the Board of Education fiscal year 2023-2024 budget summary. As you know, since 2019, we've done a complete audit of our financial systems and our business practices, and we've worked to bring the district out of years of fiscal deficit. We've enjoyed a very positive relationship with the council, and we have very mutual respect for each other and through our department relationships. And we have built trust over the last several years by being honest and fair in our interactions, and we appreciate that partnership that we have enjoyed with you. Last year, the Board of Education was asked to reduce its budget by $1.5 million so that the city could have a $0 increase. And to that end, we found alternative funding sources and moved salaries and other items to ESSER grants and to the 2021 budget surplus so that we could prepay them in advance. We also benefited from a reduction in the health insurance budget due to negotiated contract settlements. Tonight, there are really 4 big ideas in my high-level summary of where we stand at this juncture from a budget standpoint. Number 1, our Board of Education approved a budget that has a 6.98% increase due to a 7.25% increase in tuition from NFA and high-cost special education expenses. The manager is recommending a 2.5% increase to our budget, and that difference is approximately $3.9 million. The district cannot operate at that level without a drastic impact on the children of Norwich and our pre-K through 8 school system. Number 2, we previously all agreed to lessen our reliance on grants, which is best practice in financial management, and we are getting farther away from that goal with the commitment that we made last year. Our compliance with the $0 rate increase last year caused us to move more FTEs and expenses out of the operational budget and into grants that we know will be fading away. We don't want to hit that fiscal cliff. Our compliance last year to achieve the $0 rate made a significant impact on this year's increase that we are asking you for. It makes the increase look larger than it actually is because we are not operating at a base foundation. We are operating in a conceptual whole. That's where we started. Number 3, we have a new unfunded mandate from the state of Connecticut. It is a reading program that costs between $3 and $5 million, which must be implemented in the fall. Materials need to be purchased right now, and training needs to begin now and largely over the summer. And this is a mandate for all Connecticut districts. And number 4, most importantly, educating a child in 2023 is very different than it was in the past. The world has changed, and the needs of our children have changed. There is a requirement for staffing, training, and materials that we just didn't have before. This problem is not unique to Norwich. NFA is likely experiencing that change as well, and that's probably why they're increasing our tuition so significantly. A significant decrease in funding would surely result in a lack of mental health support, lack of educational academic support, and a decrease in student and staff safety. It would also cause a major cost increase in our out-of-district special education placements, legal fees, outside special education evaluation and mental health services, and it would also cost more staff to turn over, largely what you were hearing from the library, because staff need to be safe and secure and overall not suffer from burnout. So we would much rather invest in our schools rather than react to shortchanging of services. Students require now a different kind of education and support. They need to know how to regulate their emotions, to calm themselves, behave appropriately for learning, not bully other students on the internet or in person, They need to learn how to self-regulate, have empathy, and care and concern for others. Those are community values that we have here in Norwich, and we need to teach that in the public schools now. We are seeing more students than ever before who struggle with toileting, hygiene, and basic self-care. We have seen a drastic increase in students who struggle with mental illness, trauma. They're seeing domestic violence, homelessness, experiencing anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideations. Some of the examples of increase in staffing that has occurred is board-certified behavior analysts, registered behavior technicians, social workers, psychologists, elementary school counselors, deans of students, special education teachers, ESL teachers, assistant principals to do all of the bullying and Title IX investigations that are required by policy and law. One-to-one paraprofessionals that students are entering our school department with, school resource officers, nurses, substitute teachers, and other teachers for academic need. We have invested in training for teachers and staff, calming and sensory spaces in our schools, explicit learning systems, and sometimes outside evaluation and placements for students with significant mental health and academic needs. In this budget, there are 4 major budget drivers that are fixed costs. One, outside tuition is now, and probably for the first time, our single largest budget expense, and we have absolutely no control over that rate or the increase of that tuition. Number 2, salary and benefits have increased due to negotiated labor contracts, keeping up with the market and what teachers and other staff will seek out elsewhere and not work in Norwich. Number 3, the rate of inflation is currently 6.5%, but last month it was 7.8%. Number 4, tuition, utilities, and transportation account for 49.1% of the proposed budget. And at only a 2.5% increase, we would be operating in a serious deficit. In closing, I believe that we have created a fiscally responsible budget that meets the needs of our students. In order to properly serve our littlest learners in preschool through grade 8, we need more than 2.5%. We are here tonight as partners. We serve the students, parents, and community members alongside you. We understand that the school department is not a standalone entity. We acknowledge that much like outside tuitions represent a significant amount of our Board of Ed budget, the public schools certainly represent a significant amount of the City of Norwich's budget. We appreciate that the community members and taxpayers are still suffering from the pandemic and struggling due to the high rate of inflation and the outrageous costs of things that they need in order to care for their families and their homes. We are committed to do everything we can to help lessen the impact of the city budget on the taxpayers and the community without compromising the education of our children. We look forward to creatively brainstorming and working as partners with our city manager and the council to that end during our ad hoc meetings. Bob has prepared a budget summary that he's passed out to you. It's by object. We're happy to answer any questions you might have for us tonight, and it is truly with much gratitude that I thank you for your unwavering support of the school department and the generosity of your time this evening.
Thank you. Bob, anything you want to add?
No, I think the superintendent, she's said
Okay.
it very well, and I'll just be embellishing on that, and I'm sure all you guys have some questions for us.
All right, thank you. Members, questions? President Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here tonight. Superintendent Stringfellow, could you drill down for us on this unfunded mandate regarding the reading program that must start in the fall?
Certainly. There has been a lot of research about the science of reading and how students learn to read. And there is a national clearinghouse called Ed Reports that has, over a period of years, identified which publishers' materials on the market today meet that criteria and which don't. And the State Department of Education in Connecticut has surveyed all of the local districts. Almost none are using the 4 or 5 programs that comply with this sort of national clearinghouse of what really matters to readers. And so legislators have made it law that for the fall, we must, in preschool through grade 3, choose one of those programs. And so there was a lot of back and forth in the fall of this year. Different districts have asked for waivers. They're arguing with this research. We've read the research, and it looks to be very valid. There is a science to learning how to read. And so we did a district review of the different programs, and we're planning to comply with the law. We could have decided to only comply with the law in grades K through 3. Overall, to map this out, K through 3, 4 through 5, 6 through 8, would have taken longer for our children to get the appropriate reading program, and it also would have been more costly in the long run. So buying it as a package for preschool through 8, starting with PD for all of our teachers and staff and administrators this year, in the long run ended up being more cost efficient, but it is a truly unfunded mandate. We're not receiving any grant monies to help us with this. And it wasn't something that we could have anticipated.
Well, thank you. You just answered my second question. So the legislature provided no funding, whether you're an alliance district or what your demographics might be or otherwise. It provided no funding for districts to implement this program. They just said, get it done, figure it out.
And we have asked for it, and at our because we are an alliance district, we meet with the State Department group several times a year. We just met a few weeks ago, and we asked about it again because it's not going to be able to come out of the operating budget. We're going to have to, again, over-rely on grants. And they said that they're working on some things. There may be some support coming, but we don't have that now.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Other members, questions? Alderwoman Gould.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. You knew I was going to ask this question, so your staffing levels have increased tremendously.
Yes.
I went back and got my books out from 2021 and 2022. You went from 380 general fund positions in 21-22. In 22-23 at 461 general fund positions. Now you're looking to increase that by another 31 positions. And your grant fund positions are increasing, your grant funded positions are increasing as well. Our enrollment is fairly flat.
Correct.
Where are these people going and what will they be doing?
So I talked about it in my intro. They are, and in our last budget subcommittee meeting. So last year, when my assistant superintendent and I took over Global Middle School, we determined that one of the issues with students being unsafe and with student management is that there was only one team of every middle school section, and therefore if children got into an argument or they were bullying each other or the very fun dance of social media, there was nowhere else to put them except having them leave their school and go to Kelly, which had an overburden at Kelly. And so we made the decision last year to add another team. That lowered class size, and our classrooms are flourishing. Their students are learning, students are safe, and if there are bullying episodes, then we have 2 different teams that we can separate children on so that they can feel comfortable coming to school. We also reorganized and added last year elementary school counselors. The mental health needs of the students that are coming to school today are different than I have seen in 34 years of being an educator. We are seeing kindergartners that are coming in who have not had preschool, they've not had daycare, they were isolated away from grandparents, and extended family members, so they didn't necessarily learn a lot of the behavior, social, and personal hygiene lessons that one learns when they're not isolated away from family and community centers. And so we are seeing a need for counselors, social workers, psychologists, registered behavior technicians, board-certified behavior analysts. When I was hired, I believe we had one board-certified behavior analyst. Now we have one in every school. We did not have registered behavior technicians. Now we have 2 to 4 in every school, depending upon the behavioral needs of the students. Students have, what they do is they analyze the student behavior, they develop a functional behavior assessment, they provide interventions, and they put forward a behavior intervention plan so that students are learning how to behave in a classroom so that learning can occur. We've had to add to our nurses because we have students that have significant medical needs, some on G-tubes, diabetics, some that have seizure disorders that we call 911 on quite frequently. And we've made a concerted effort over the last 4 years to bring students back from costly out-of-district placements. When that happens, our special ed department needs to build a staffing model. So we brought back a program that was an outside placement. I'm even forgetting what the name of it was at Global, and now we have an internal program. That is it's a swap between paying an out-of-district tuition and the transportation, and then having the programs in our neighborhood schools where kids can go to school with their neighbors and their siblings. And that's what parents want, and we can deliver it, but it costs more FTEs to do that. We have, let me just make sure. We added SROs, which are in the grant funded. At some point, they're gonna need to come into the operating budget. We have significant academic need. When I got here, there were no reading teachers. I had never, ever heard of a school department that didn't have reading teachers. Now we have 1 to 3 in every school, and they're teaching children how to read. So we're seeing gains. When I came here, I can only go with that, like when I can't speak to before that. But we didn't have an ESL director. We didn't have enough ESL teachers to be compliant with state law. And so we had to do an overhaul of that department. And now the State Department is just like amazed with the amount of growth that our English language learners have made academically. They're being exited from that support. And it's because we're appropriately staffing them now. And so there have been very planned throughout our strategic plan investment initiatives over the first 3, now 4 years of my service here. This year, I'm not adding anything. I'm only having to add special education supports for kids that have that direct need. So it's not like I have a big plan to hire a whole another 15 teachers for global. We feel like we're at a very good place, and now we have to maintain it. We also have to make sure that the grant funding, which is going to go away, doesn't lead us to a fiscal cliff where we're all of a sudden cutting, teaching positions and mental health support, because that wouldn't be good for kids.
If I might add, education is a people-driven business, and we're fully aware of the impact of salaries and FTEs on a budget. With that said, I did the 22-23 budget, so I stand behind. I know who is in the 461 FTEs. I know it by person and name, vacant position. I can tell you the same thing for the 23-24 budget. We've identified the specific increases and where they are. When I started in April 1st or March 29th of 2021, and then inherited a budget, I tried to validate or find out what the FTEs are. I couldn't even figure out how many people worked here at that point in time. So I won't say with 100% certainty that the 380 number that you referenced for 21-22 is wrong, but I know that year the district turned back, had over a $4 million surplus, and I would find that hard to do if we had increased FTEs by that amount. Going forward, I've made a promise to, I'll always be able to identify the FTEs and where it is, but I just can't speak to the 380 number, and I've had that conversation with a lot of people before.
All right, so as a follow-up, if I may, these 30 plus 31 FTEs have already been hired? Or you are proposing
That's correct. They're here.
30 more?
No,
No.
they're here.
They're already working for us.
So then so you've already put them in for the 22-23 year, these 30 positions?
Yes. They include the 11 certified staff at Global, a custodian at Global.
Administrator, yeah, I've got the list in front of me.
That's
Right.
what they are. The 2 BCBAs, 5 special ed paraprofessionals, they already work here.
You know, with regard to the pre-K program and the early learning facilitators, we had some long discussions during the final Board of Ed Finance Subcommittee. We're hopeful that maybe there'll be some grant funding to support that, but at this point, we don't know. And the difficulty with the district is we're one of 10 districts that have the full year, full day program. Operating at 48 weeks of the year, 10 hours a day is problematic. And but my previous work experience, I didn't even know that program existed because, again, only 10 districts do that. And when we first came here, there was program was not functional fully because of COVID, and then 21, 22, there was a waiver for it. So waiver went away this year, and suddenly we're faced with, what do you mean we have 10 hours a day? Where did that come from? School vacation weeks, this has to be staffed, and the director's working on the calendar for next year, because there's only 4 weeks where the program won't be functional.
That's very unusual for a public school. Public schools usually operate 180 to 185 days and don't go, 10-hour days.
Mm-hmm.
So it's incompatible with our collective bargaining agreements. Staffing is very complicated to be able to provide that service for our families.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll discuss that in our ad hoc committee meetings, but you can't have a paraprofessional staff those because they don't meet the needs of the pre-K educator requirements, and they have to work under the direction of a special ed teacher. And we've had to use substitutes at a higher rate of pay this year to fill that need. It's been a very challenging situation to fill.
We also did without, so we had, in the last 2 years when we spoke about FTEs, many were unfilled. And that's a reason why we were able to give back funding at the end of the year. So if we didn't have 2 math teachers or 3 science teachers and we had a substitute in their place, that was certainly more cost effective, but it wasn't educationally sound. We didn't have any choice. We didn't have any. We're now almost fully staffed, and we're projecting for next year to be fully staffed. And so we're finally getting to the point where our diverse educator workforce plan, which is a part of our Alliance grant, is bringing us teachers that we're growing within. Folks who live in Norwich, who are dedicated to the community, who we've been able to support through alternative certification programs, are now teachers. So that's a beautiful thing. But from a financial perspective, the days of having those vacancies are starting to end. That's great educationally. That's not great financially, because we would love to bring back a surplus to you every year. But that's one of the things you're experiencing.
So you're not planning on hiring one new person for 23, 24?
I hope not.
Okay.
But I have to always say my disclaimer, that if a child walks in with a special education plan that requires their own nurse on a bus, or their own paraprofessional, or a special ed program that we can't support in our schools without hiring a specialist, then those are requirements I can't do without. And that's the same with ESL. We can't predict who's going to move in. We can't predict the needs that are going to arise. But from a foundational perspective, we have reading teachers now, we have math specialists, we have ESL teachers. We have a solid plan, and it was planned out in our strategic plan.
And the 30 people that you've hired already, are they being paid with American Rescue Plan dollars? How are they being paid right now?
These are all in the operating budget.
And from your American Rescue Plan dollars, what do you have left?
In
Or
essence,
anything that you, maybe it's not from American Rescue Plan, COVID-related funds, what do you have
yeah,
left?
These grants have gone by several different acronyms and names. I just called them COVID, ESSER 1, 2, and 3. So in the ESSER 2 grant, which expires in September of 2023, that grant, based on the people who are in it now, will be fully expended at the end of June. So there'll be $0 left in ESSER 2.
And ESSER 1 is
Yeah,
gone.
ESSER 1 was gone a year ago, and so was the original $6.9 million that the district received in that 4-month window for the initial COVID batch. ESSER 3, which was the largest amount, that grant expires in September of 2024. Based on, I met with the assistant superintendent last week, and based on the forecast of people who are in the grant now, at the start of this new school year, there'll be $4.5 million left. To the superintendent's previous comments about the reading program, we have already spent $1.4 million from ESSER to fund that reading program, and Assistant Superintendent Gloucester informed me that there's at least another $1 million coming out of ESSER 3 to pay for that reading program.
So most of ESSER 3 is going to be paying for this $3 million unfunded mandate.
I'm not sure what the total amount will be, but it will pay between what's already been purchased or ordered, and Tamara told me she had another order going in for a little over $1 million. That, in round numbers, that would be $2.5 million that's come out of ESSER 3.
Okay, so that really doesn't have an impact on,
That's what I said. As I
Okay.
said in the beginning, is that it is an unfunded mandate, but a large portion of it is coming from ESSER. But for us, the grants in the operating budget are a balance. That's our money altogether. So just as you saw us move some salaries last year to hit the zero mill rate, there's no more moving anymore once these funds, grant funds are fully expended.
And
That's the word.
I'm sure you're all aware that the Board of Education has been having discussions regarding designated high schools. We've had conversations with NFA. They've been very positive discussions. If, depending on the course that it takes, one option that NFA had for us would be a future reduction in our Norwich discount. Currently, it's at $200 per student. If through I don't know what the correct term is, undesignated certain high schools.
Yes.
If we were able to direct those to NFA, that could cause the discount to increase by either $100 or $200, depending on how many students go. Because, as Dr. Stringfellow said, they have the same issues we have, but most of their revenue comes from tuition, and if their enrollment is below their targeted business model number, they need more students.
Right.
And we're 70% of their enrollment, so we can help in that regard, and it would help us in terms of future rate increases and lower tuition costs, but the Board of Ed has to examine that in great detail, and I believe we have a policy meeting scheduled tomorrow for that.
and my last one, Mr. Peckham has done an outstanding job. How many families did we happen to find this year?
We'll look it up on my phone while we speak. Can you
He's a
maybe
very
ask
busy
another
man.
question? He reports out every Board of Ed meeting, I just have not memorized it.
Because I would have thought when word got around,
One would think.
one would think,
And I would
Isn't
say,
that hopeful thinking?
well,
So he was able to, he's busy, and so he brought on a partner, if you will, David Allen, and David Allen has been able to do this work with our out-of-district placement. So if you have a $100,000 tuition special education program, you want to be sure that it's a Norwich resident child that is benefiting from that. And so,
and NFA has been supportive and helpful
Very,
with
very helpful.
Ed Peckham in this residency issue.
Mhm.
They actually just recently sent me an email 2 weeks ago, the student who actually never made it there this year because they're in jail in another state. That's unfortunate, but
That's unfortunate.
they do help.
Sorry, the phone app is not as fun as the internet app, but can we maybe send that to you?
Sure.
Thank you.
I mean, if you said, it's 20, it's 100, it's 6.
Oh, it's significant. And we really haven't had any residency hearings this year. So I think that when Ed finds them to be not in compliance, they register where they live, which was not our experience the first year.
And
Every time Ed came upon someone, he would sit with days of videotapes where he had followed them and, had to prove that they weren't living there. I think that part has caught on. I think this is what I hope. But now that he visits them and says, you don't live here, you need to register where you live.
And just so you know how the process works, when we get a tuition invoice, it goes directly to Ed, and he verifies and validates that every student is a Norwich student, regardless of which school it is, whether it's an NFA or a Griswold or a magnet school. So he looks at every invoice before we pay them.
And we have a system now where students going from, from 5th, we had to build to this. So our first step was students going from 8th to high school cannot register until they've proven residency. And that takes all year, even though we've modernized our registration techniques. It used to be paper and pencil, and now we're online. We have a Spanish translation registrar and a thank you. Oh, very good. Here you go. Can you? He found it. Thank you. That's wonderful. And we have a Haitian Creole registrar. But it just takes a very long time for parents to attend to this business and gather their documents and prove residency through Ed. My first week here, I will never forget getting a blank piece of paper that said something to the effect of, please remit like $3.5 million to NFA. And I looked at it, and it didn't have any detail, no student names, no addresses. And I thought, I'm not going to sign this. I don't even know what it is. They'll fire me for certain on my very first week. And now we cross-reference our lists of children together with the registrar at NFA. That's a wonderful relationship that has blossomed. And we are able to, the registrar sends us information if a child moves. And so we can cross-reference that to next year's budget. And we didn't have any of that checks and balances in. Then the following year, after the 8th to high school enrollment was secure, we did the same for 5th to 6th. And we aspire to get to the point where every single year everyone is proving enrollment. That's hard for families, but in districts that I've worked in, on the first day of school, you come in with your proof of residency, your cable bill, your mortgage statement, something. We have certainly a plethora of items that you can prove residency with. We're not there yet, but we're much, much closer to identifying.
So for the month of February, Ed identified 4 K-8 regular education students, 3 special ed high school students, and his estimate on the yearly cost of those students for tuition and transportation was $239,807. And as a running total, since the inception of the program 3 years and 4 months ago, the savings have been $9,385,081.
That's good.
$81.
So,
Worth his weight in gold.
Yes.
how much money was spent before Ed came.
And you said we're working on building a system for 1st through
So it would
5th?
be ideal if every student that came in every year proved residency. We have a lot of transiency. We're not there yet. So what ends up happening is there is a system for when you're new to Norwich, when you're an entering kindergartner, the transition between 5th and 6th, everybody must prove residency or they don't get into the middle school lottery.
Okay,
And then when you're going to high school, we will not pay your tuition if you have not proven residency. Those are not fun conversations mid-August, but we do start the process the September previous. And every child who we pay a tuition for in high school has proven residency. And then Ed, in addition to that, does the checks whenever, mail will be returned to the school, or a citizen will say, Mrs. Gould's son doesn't live there, the grandma lives in Preston and drops him off, or things like that, that he investigates. But eventually, what we would love to get to is every student every year, and lots of urban districts that I've known have a system to be able to do that. We don't have the manpower with just the 2 yet, but that's our overall plan.
You might recall in my tuition analysis that I do with NFA, regular ed tuition is billed 1 year in arrears, so
right.
the budget number should always equal the actual, and you'll actually find a discrepancy this year. I believe it's 2 students. When we were doing the budget, we had the number of, I think it was 1209 from NFA, and Ed contested 2 of the students, and it took a long time, but he ultimately prevailed. So that's why you look at NFA's tuition line item for this year for regular ed, it's actually less than the budget, and that was because of Ed's efforts on 2 students.
Thank you.
Members, Alderman Singh.
Well, thank you very much for being here, and I'll be a little mindful of the time because I know Pat is waiting for us. But so I said on a couple of the budgets as a Board of Education member, so I know it's very challenging work and there's a lot of predictions that we have to deal with, especially based upon grants, and we don't know who gonna walk in our doors and what their needs are. So, well, saying all that, coming to SR3, just I think that'll be Bob thing to do that calculation. So that you said 4.5 million is left in it, right?
Yes.
And we'll be using almost 2.5 million out of it.
No.
1.4 and 1 million?
Maybe I misspoke. Already spent has been about 1.4 million out of ESSER, so that's gone.
That's gone.
After the million has been ordered, there'll be 4.5 million left. So nothing will,
Okay.
unless there's additional cost above and beyond the 2.5 that Tamara's already ordered.
And how much do we have in that undesignated fund balance?
It's roughly about 3.3 million. I'm not sure if the city council is aware of it, but the superintendent instituted a budget freeze for this year about 2 weeks ago. We have higher than anticipated special education costs and transportation costs associated with that. As the year has gone on, it's clear that they're not getting any lower. What was looking like a positive variance in transportation is now going to be at least $80,000 to $100,000 in the negative. We have had a significant increase in McKinney-Vento transportation that's not covered by grants.
Okay.
We're probably going to have to use some of the undesignated fund to cover the special ed tuitions. Our target is to make our deficit less than the total overall special ed cost, because the intent of creating that fund was not to use it for normal operating expenses. It was for special ed expenses that were unanticipated and capital projects and emergencies.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure in our ad hoc committee we'll have a lot of discussions, line item discussions, so thank you.
Thank you. Are there further questions? I have some about the unfunded mandate with the reading program. How is that broken down? You're purchasing the program, you're putting your staff through the training. Can you break down those costs? And then in, let's say, year 2, what do you anticipate? What is going to be a continuing ongoing cost for that program, or do you now own it? Are we talking about textbooks? Are we talking about computer services that through the kids' laptops? I mean, how is this actually being achieved?
So there are teacher manuals that are hardbound and online. There are student materials that are hardbound and online. There are the reading program that our curriculum council, comprised of teachers and principals, decided to purchase is called Savas, and it has a really strong multi-language learner support mechanism. And so some of the interesting pieces about it are if a student is learning English, and we have a significant amount of English language learners, they can have the English print on one side of their computer screen and their home language on the right side, or if they are really about to exit from ESL and they're not sure of a few words, they can highlight them and move them. So those are the type of computer programs we have. But there are classroom libraries as well, and there's a lot of phonemic elements and phonics elements that replace two. So the good news is it replaces two of the programs that we currently have, Foundations and Haggerty. It's like all in one. Right now we have Teachers College and then a phonemic and a phonics program. This is everything all together, more seamless. And I would say that it's the initial investment that really is a heavy lift. Our annual investments over time, like we have for Eureka Math, because we had to buy a whole new math program. My second year here, we didn't have one. So it's the initial training, the initial investment, and then we have very strong, highly capable teachers who serve to turnkey the training once they've been trained. So that cost diminishes, and we're able to do a lot of it in-house. We also are moving out the print shop. I don't think Bob mentioned that. So we had, I did not know until I was laying off people in COVID and trying to figure out, here's your mask and your Binex test and your paycheck and you're working from home, but you can't work from home, that we had a print shop. And 2 full-time staff members and a significant cost. But over time, we're not printing like we were when the print shop first came into fashion. A lot of our work is digital. We use Google Classroom. We use a lot of materials on iPads and laptops. And we had learned, Bob and I did an audit of the program, and we had learned that a lot of the printing that they were doing, like business cards. So when Bob started, we got him some business cards, a nice little box, 1 box only is all you get. And they sent that out. So we paid the print shop paid whomever they bought it from, let's say Staples, and then we got the business cards. And so we've informed that agency that we're discontinuing our relationship with them, and we're also discontinuing our relationship with Kelly Services, which is a substitute service, because we have found greater success bringing in our own candidates, our own teacher sub-candidates. Their fulfillment rates were 3 or 4 people a day, where we have lists of people in the district that are absent per day.
In round numbers, the print shop annual contract is $205,000 plus supplies. So there's 2 outside service people there full-time. So if you did a rough estimate between their salary and benefits at $75,000 per person, that's $150,000. I'm assuming that we'll probably have $50,000 worth of printing and supplies. The district administrators and buildings who are used to sending stuff to the print shop aren't
Like
happy.
a graduation pamphlet.
They'll have to make other arrangements. And as Dr. Springfellow said, I showed Josh the city's tax envelopes that were ordered. Places the order with the print shop then places it with a vendor, and the vendor sends them to here, and then he delivers them. And all that did was add time to the process. And there'll be some minor disruption in some of our civic groups, but we can't.
Sunrise
We
Rotary.
can't justify having 2 full-time people. I don't care if they're our employees or subcontractors making copies.
I would rather have 2 first-grade teachers, please. It just makes more sense for a school department.
Understand.
Is there a scope of service contract with this reading program?
There is a contract that I'm sure she had to sign, and Tamara Glosser had to sign in order to purchase the items, and then a professional development plan, and we can get to you what we have.
And does that include annual updating of the program? If the program is changed, you're not forced to go back in as a new user now. You're an existing customer. I mean, how is that going to function?
That's an excellent question. I had a high school in my last district, and we had science books that still had Pluto as a planet. And I thought, like, the day that the science books are created, they go out of print. They're not out of print, but they're not accurate anymore. And so the print items are mostly teacher manuals that talk about the program. And so the content can change and get updated, and it won't change the instructional methodology and the plan for the teacher delivering the lesson. And then books that the kids read. And so these books have been books that you all have in your children's libraries. I'm sure I certainly have them as a classroom teacher. And then more updated global works from all, cultures across the entire globe. And so those won't go out of fashion. We may have to, in a few years, add a more updated set of student library selections, but that's anticipated in any reading program. Mostly, I would say, it's the upfront cost of the original program, but we'll get you, I'll find whatever we have for you and send it through.
Thank you. The members? Thank you. We're all set. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your phone.
The next budget is on page 92, and it's the Public Works budget. And we have the Public Works Director representing the budget this evening. Give you a second to go to 92. Now, the Public Works budget is subdivided into 7 divisions, and each one has a separate budget in the general fund budget. So combined, the Public Works budget proposed for next year is $12,670,000. The budget projected for 22-23 was 12.1, so it's an increase of about $500,000. This department has been one of the departments that took a big impact on inflation. They do most of the consumption of fuel. Salt has gotten really out of whack. I think next year it will maybe stabilize because they took a hit this year, salt, because nobody used it. So it should help some of the demand next year. But with that, parts replacement for all automotive repair has really gone up. It's stabilized a little bit now, but the increases are there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat, and he'll start actually on page 94 with the Streets and Park Maintenance Division, and we'll go from there. Do you want to go through each division and then ask questions, or we'll go through a division, then you ask questions?
Pat, what's your
Up to you.
preference?
I have no preference either way.
Okay.
I'll just,
Whatever
you
the
can
council.
chime in with questions at any point.
All right.
Um,
Then let's start with the parks maintenance, please.
Okay, so we're not, overall, really in the budget, we're not asking for any additional positions. positions. Actually, technically, we're asking for a quarter of a position, but that's for a quarter of a mechanic down when we get to that division because of the ARP funds are gonna be used up and then, but anyway. In the streets division, we're maintaining, we'd like to maintain the 35 positions that we have currently. As far as increases, cost-driven increases, basically, I mean, there's the increases are mainly in supplies. All kinds of supplies, the costs have really escalated, especially, as John had mentioned, with salt. That went from, the year before last, it went from 64 to 75 a ton, and this year it went up to 94 a ton. Now, luckily, we didn't have to use a lot of it this winter, but next winter we'll probably be using an average amount. That's what we have to budget for. And, so the cost of that salt is going to be considerably. It may come down slightly because it had escalated so much in the past, but we don't know that until the state bid goes out in July, basically. Also, asphalt materials have gone up significantly in cost, and any other type of parts. So, we're basically just asking to maintain the status. Fringe benefits are one of the bigger driving increases. So for engineering and admin, we're not requesting any kind of changes really. We greatly appreciate the position of the environmental coordinator that we added this past year. It took us a little while to hire that into that position, but in November we hired a young woman that's doing a great job. She's very enthusiastic, and she's out there on the streets, boots on the ground, trying to get a better control on the recycling and the trash collection, and also particularly with bulky waste. She's calling it in, she's being proactive, she sees piles out there, she tells people, hey, you're supposed to be calling this in before you put it out there, but then she calls it in and we get it picked up. And I think the streets have been, I think, noticeably cleaner in the last few months than they were before. I mean, people still keep putting stuff out, but I think we've got a better handle on it now, in a large part because we've got that position staffed. So for fleet maintenance, we also added that mechanic this past year with the ARP funding. The ARP funding will be, we had funded it, we had 18 months of ARP funding for a mechanic's position. Because we weren't able to hire one for a few months, we've got 3/4 of this coming year left still. And that's why there's a quarter of a position for one of the mechanics in the budget. I think we've reduced our backlog of workload down at the garage. It will never really get caught up, I don't think, but we've reduced the backlog. And, there's a lot of, the city has a lot of equipment, a lot of vehicles, a lot of fire trucks that we maintain. And we keep those vehicles on the road for a considerable amount of time. I know a lot of our vehicles in public works are up near the 20-year mark and beyond it, but they've been maintained well and they're still serviceable. So we ask to continue with that, with the staffing levels that we have in that division. Refuse and recycling has a little bit of cost increase. The contract with the collection, automated collection, has a built-in 2.75% increase every year. SCARA, the price of disposal at the incinerator is going up $2 a ton this coming year. So, you know, we've got about, that's about a $50,000 increase right there. So, so there's a slight increase to the solid waste disposal budget.
We can mention that we did adjust that by,
Yeah, we adjusted for the haulers, the commercial haulers, you know, we raised that price, we pass it along. But then for the residential stuff that we're picking up, we don't, you know, we pay for that, or so the city pays for that,
so we'll get a little bit more revenue on that to offset, but not the bulk.
Not for the whole.
Not the bulk of it.
Not for all the tonnage.
No.
Just the stuff that comes in through the commercial haulers. In the building maintenance division, basically that's a pretty flat budget. The cost of a lot of materials for building renovations has gone up drastically too, though. We're gonna be a little over budget on in the building maintenance division this current year. You know, fortunately, we've got some savings in like less overtime and less salt, so, you know, we'll be able to cover that adequately within the department, but within, just for the building maintenance division, it's been, you know, building repairs have gotten more expensive. Parking maintenance division is basically, you know, just keeping that flat, basically. We didn't get funded. What was it? Josh said. Building the bottom line of that parking maintenance division.
Yes, that's related to the Public Parking Commission. I was putting together the Public Parking Commission budget, which the commission will get to look at next week. And part of the plan would be to use some of the savings in administrative costs to have the PPC pay for more of the maintenance costs for its lots and garages, taking some of the burden off the general fund. So that's how those two budgets kind of interact there.
That explains the reduction in that last line item there. So that's pretty much it for the operating budget. I don't know if there's anything.
Members' question? Alderman Singh.
Thank you, Pat. So of course, it's one of the very important department, I will say, because that's where anybody enters Norwich, that's all they see. Street signs, parking, so everything is combined in this. My thing is, some of the requests in some of the categories were lower, and in the proposed one, John is trying to put a little extra money for that. Like street maintenance and the fleet maintenance, we are trying to take some money out, and we are trying to put some more money towards engineering and, you know, towards the street lighting and building maintenance. You have any comments on that? Like, is...
I think, you know, I was privileged to see a draft copy earlier, and went back and forth a little bit, but I'm comfortable with the city manager's proposed budget. I think we can live within that.
Okay. And I think the difference is only pretty much $76,000. Is there any negative impact that you see with that, or from the...
It's hard to, you know, it's a budget, it's a guesstimate.
Yeah.
If we have a, you know, really tough winter, you know, it probably won't, you know, it might be a little short. If we have an average or slightly less than average winter, we can probably make do, but it's, I mean, it's, we have to, certain things we have to do regardless of how much money is in the budget as far as, like, when it snows, we have to get out there and clean the roads. We didn't take anything out of overtime, but we, there's a, we knocked down, like, was there any particular, like, seasonals, he gave me a little less money, but that's an item that it's been hard to fill lately anyway. We actually, though, this is coming, we just hired 2 good, what appear to be good candidates for seasonal work for the streets division, but it is, that was one that, was reduced a little bit.
I think that one of the major changes is the estimate for vehicle fuel costs. When we first sent out budget guidance to all the departments, gas and diesel, that was in October, November, and gas and diesel was substantially higher than it is now. So if you look on page 96, the estimate for vehicle fuel went from 189,814 at the time of the budget request down to 137,805, and that has to do with the decrease in gas and diesel between October and March.
Well, that's another one, though, that we can't guarantee where it's gonna go. That's the one item, if any, you're probably the least comfortable with.
We hedged that by...
We went back and forth on that one.
Yeah, we hedged that citywide by putting some additional money in the contingency account. So it's... we haven't exceeded the amount that we put in the contingency account on fuel and utilities in a very long time.
Okay, and that might be a question for John. So what's any particular reason you want to put more money towards street lighting, more development,
It's just
or?
electricity's up, I believe.
Yeah, that's also, we had more information from public utilities later on in the process.
Oh, okay, that's why.
Basically, the change in what we knew about utilities between October and March.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Other members? Alderwoman Gould.
So we have the, I don't know the acronym for it, but the NIPS program, for lack of a better term. And how are we using that money to address the chronic problem of people throwing nips out their car window?
Well, I'm not sure if it's an exact, that's where the revenue source is coming from. The only way to combat that is to be out there picking up litter. And really, the money that is generated from that was designed, and it says right in the legislation, for positions such as recycling coordinators.
Mm-hmm.
So, we get about $100,000 a year for NIP sales, NIP revenue to the city, which we're I guess we're NIP rich. Because we get more than most, it's a high number.
We are the NIP capital of the
Southeastern Connecticut?
So, anyway, to answer that question, I was looking into maybe trying to get a little bit of youth labor possibly to go out with our recycling quarter and maybe do some of that. The Public Works crews, the Streets Division, does roadside litter pickup mostly in the winter. The Building Maintenance Division does some litter picking up downtown. But what we did with that money was to hire the recycling coordinator. She's working at all kinds of different activities. One of the things she just came up with actually was adopt a storm drain. Other states have this program, and you kind of keep the storm drain clean out in front of your house. You report back what kind of things you've taken off of it, and she's going to kick that program off later this month. I think we'll be the first town in Connecticut. Other states, Massachusetts, I guess it's pretty big in. But you know, that's kind of keeping the waterways clean. And I'm sure there's nip bottles on those catch basin grates. I know, I've seen them, you know. But that's what we're doing with that.
But that's part of her, the recycling coordinator's efforts.
Yeah, she's
To do the bulky waste.
Yeah, she's working on the bulky waste pickup. She's working on elimination of contamination in the recycling stream, you know, and getting contamination out of the trash too. That certain items aren't supposed to be in the trash. And then it just gets left there if it's not picked, you know, it doesn't get picked up if there's sheetrock or, you know,
Right.
building demolition debris in it or organic leaves and sticks, whatever. So she's working to educate people on that.
And I think we've done it in the past, that the handout, brochure that you get from SCARA, maybe could go into the utility bills again,
Yeah.
to remind people that, you know, these are the things that you can put in the green, these are the things you can put in the blue, and these are the things that you are responsible
And
for
we're getting
disposing
new
of
stickers.
yourself.
We're getting those stickers that go on the trash carts that says what is recyclable, what goes in the cart. We just, SCARA was out of those, so we pushed them to make up some new ones, and we're gonna be getting those and getting those out too to help. Because the contamination of the recyclables is a big problem.
And when you say that, you're talking about, you were only supposed to put these products in there, and someone has thrown in something that, you know, I always say
Styrofoam or something.
styrofoam or a pizza box that was supposed to go in your garbage, and that affects our rate for recycling?
Well,
How does that affect?
so far, there's no direct, we might get notice if the trucks that we're picking up here had a high rate of contamination. So far, there hasn't been any financial penalty for that, but the day is coming when there will be financial penalty for unclean recycling. So we're trying to get ahead of that.
Get the word out.
Before the penalties are in place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? President Pro Tem, please.
Real quick, Pat, thank you for being here tonight. If we held your increase to your budget to 2.5%, that would be about $250,000 less than what's in the city manager's proposed budget. What kind of impact would that have on the divisions in your department?
So that'd be about 250,000.
Roughly.
It would have a pretty significant impact. That could be a couple positions in material, you know, and some materials. That would be pretty impactful. Because there's certain cost increases, things have increased in cost at no control of ours. Like at the beginning of the budget, it says inflation was roughly 6%, you know, so, I mean, materials that we buy and use every day have gotten more expensive.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Other members? A couple things. We haven't talked about capital.
Okay.
Do you have any requests in the capital not funded?
I'm glad you raised that issue, capital. I appreciate, I wanted to thank the council for, you know, doing, like, adequately funding a lot of our capital requests in the past. I think things like, and we've added in throughout the year sometimes, like the bucket truck last year, that has really been able to do a lot of work and save money. Our guys are quite efficient in using that truck. We were fortunate to have someone that worked for a tree company for 12 years before he came to Public Works, who is, you know, an expert treeman, and he's training the other people, and we're making great use out of that equipment. The backhaul, we're putting that out this warm winter. We're out there in the winter months with the backhaul, which is, and our guys do a better job than a contractor, you know, without a doubt. They make note, if the catch basin might need some work, you know, isn't perfect, needs some work, they'll note that, and we'll get back out and put it on the list to repair. And they, you know, they get everybody out. They're not like trying to make sure they hit 100 catch basins a day or whatever to make their, you know, quota. They work hard and they get a lot of them done, but they get them done well. So I appreciate all the, you know, the investments that you've made, you know, in the capital equipment that we've gotten in the past. So as far as this year's budget, the replacement of the, you know, like the asphalt hot box, that's another one that's a great piece of equipment to have in the winter to be able to do some repair on potholes. And the hot box that we have now is getting so it's not as safe as it should be. It's getting too worn, too old, so I'm glad to see that the city manager's approved the, or went along with the request to replace that. The line striping machine that we use to stripe all the parking spaces and everything, that's probably 25 years old, so that's going to be a nice addition to our equipment. Most importantly is the backhoe replacement with a wheeled excavator. Our backhoe is 25 years old. It's got more play in the bucket, in the backhoe than it should, you know, than it should have.
The pins are wearing out.
Yeah, I mean, we use it a lot, and so that's a big piece of equipment to replace, and I'm very grateful that it made the cut, as well as the plow truck. I wish we could get plow trucks quicker. You know, we order them, we've got them funded. We have not yet got the one that was in the budget from 2 years ago, the year before, not this current budget, but the budget the year before, we had one plow truck in. We're still waiting to take delivery of that, even though it was ordered like July of that first, you know, when the budget was approved. We've got the 2 trucks that were, plow trucks that were on the budget last year are still, now they just told us that we're not going to get 23 models, they're going to be 24 models. They're still not in production. It's just, it's tough, but luckily we had a mild winter this winter. And we've got good mechanics that can maintain those older vehicles, but replacing that fleet, keeping it on a regular basis is very important. Pickup truck we can probably live without for a year. It's not going to cause too much angst. The mini articulated loader for the sidewalk snow removal, that'll be a great addition. Because our sidewalk equipment is really pretty old. We haven't bought a piece of sidewalk snow equipment in a long time. This piece would be a great addition. The salt shed, we're repairing it with the operating funds from this year's budget, so that's why we're probably for about $20,000 worth of materials, we're reinforcing the inside walls of the salt shed. So that's one reason why that request didn't get funded. We just decided to do it in-house. We needed to get it done now, and because of the milder winter, we had a little bit of extra money in supplies where we could make good use of that and get that work done. So then we can get it to salt, get it filled up. But overall, I'd say, I'm quite happy with the capital proposals that the city manager made. The sidewalk program, we've got some money left because during the pandemic and in the last couple of years, the interest hasn't been quite as great. We were without an engineer, one of the civil engineers for a while. We've got that position funded again, but we've got some money in there. He's out, he's getting some new people involved for the sidewalk program, but we should have enough funding with the existing funds that are available, so we don't need the additional capital this current year. So overall, I'd say we're in good shape.
Thank you, Pat. In the spring, I sent out a message in the NPU bill. You and Stacy were talking about that whole discussion, who's eligible in order for bulky waste pickup. You know, renters are as well.
Yeah.
2 a year. Most people in the apartments don't believe that. I tell them that, but that message will be going out again. I'd like you to share with the recycling coordinator if there's any message she would like to include in that message. If she sends it over to me, I will. She's out there day to day. I can tell you this past month, we did the neighborhood cleanup in downtown. I think we picked up 5,100 pounds of trash and debris. Less than 2 years ago, which was over 6,600 pounds of trash and debris. But I can tell you the back parking lots from Lord's property all the way past the Y were significantly cleaner. I hadn't seen them that clean before anybody got back there to pick anything up in a very long time. So I think she's making an impact. So please tell her that.
I will,
Thank you. Yes, Alderman Singh.
Thank you. Just a quick one, Pat. So our recycling coordinator, do they intend to do some awareness in like schools and colleges in regards to, cleanliness and keep your surrounding clean and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, she is gonna get into the schools, definitely. We
Okay.
wanna, it's, you wanna get the younger kids
Yep.
involved with it too.
And just one suggestion on the sticker that gonna go on the cans. If we can add bulk pickup number on it, that might help. The bulk pickup number, like, or have them understand the fact that they are eligible for bulk pickup twice a year, if it's not already been
The
designed.
stickers are already in the printing, but they're like something that Scare is doing. We could do some other promotion for
Okay,
what number to call for bulky waste.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Pat, thank you very much.
Okay. I'm sure you all have met Kate, but if you haven't, it's Kate Mill, and she is the new Director of Human Services, and been on the job a little more than half a year, and has done a very good job. Very pleased. It's a crucial department to the city, providing very needed services directly to many of our citizens that are in need. Had one today. Every day I almost get a call, somebody that needs some type of assistance, and we forward them up there, and they take good care of them. So I do appreciate that. Page 98 starts the summary page for Human Services. Like the Public Works Department, there's 4 divisions, Senior Center, and I do want to note that Youth and Family and Recreation have been combined into one division. So you'll see at the bottom where it used to be Recreation, it's now in the category of Youth and Family and Recreation. Now, Kate can get into that more than me, but generally, we found that there's a strong relationship between recreation and youth services, and they complement each other. So it stands to reason that if you can have the same person directing youth and family services and recreation, you get more of a, I hate to use a big word, symbiotic relationship. They help each other. So we started that this year, and we've had good luck. Our recreation programs are on schedule, and it's been working well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kate, and we'll go through the divisions one by one, starting with the senior center, which is on page 101.
Alrighty. Hi, thanks everyone. It's Kate. Before I talk about our budget, I want to highlight some people in this room. My staff are actually here tonight. I wanted to highlight them because they are absolutely, as John said, so much more than just titles and numbers on a page. So we have in the front up here, we've got Hallie, Santana, Elizabeth, and Mike. And in the back, we have Cynthia, Hannah, Edie, Aaron, Mike, and Hector. So you can see they're invested and care very much about the conversation we're going to have tonight. Thank you all for being here.
Welcome all.
So I am a pretty succinct lady, as many of you may know, and there are 4 words I want to have resonate with you today. And the first 2 are institutional investment, and the second 2 are economic development. So as you go through these budgets, I want you to continue to think about the fact that institutional investment in my administrative infrastructure has led to deliverables which are directly tied to sustainable programming, services, and the city goals. And so to that point, I made some little packets for everyone. And you've seen a lot of it, of course, the city goals and my budget narrative, but I've completely redesigned the quarterly reports so that you'll see there's a linear illustration, thank you, between all of the citywide goals, my department goals, our action items, our deliverables, and the activities we're tracking. So in terms of accountability, that's something that is new.
Thank you very much.
And in that same vein, in terms of the senior center, you'll see the institutional investment in the administrative infrastructure that's been lacking for so long. We put in that ask. The senior center office coordinator has been a void, and certainly with COVID and the disparities experienced by the senior population, it's been compounded. So we're doing a lot of exciting things in the senior center, and we need that administrative support to continue those. One of those highlights, of course, includes the pickleball court. So our senior division head got a grant to fund half of that pickleball court. We're using ARPA neighborhood revitalization dollars for the other half of that pickleball court because that is the most in-demand program for seniors, and it has, of course, not only a wellness an aspect to it and benefit to it, but there's opportunity for economic development in terms of permitting that space for leagues and such. So in terms of managing that large undertaking, we have an RFP out for that work to be done, and we're going to need some help for that. And in terms of ongoing burden on my senior division head, he's working reception during his, what should be a lunch break. We have, I think, calculated at least $20,000 in lost wages for wasted wages, in my opinion, for other staff members who have to do reception work because the administrative support isn't there. So in addition to the demand already being there, the demand is now growing, not just because of the pickleball court, but I've been partnering with Hartford Healthcare, and we submitted a community development block grant to build up our senior healthcare at the senior center. So the clinic right now, in my opinion, is underutilized, and because seniors have been experiencing health disparities, certainly at a higher rate because of COVID, we want to meet that need, and meeting that need requires administrative support in the office. So that's one of the changes you'll see, and you'll see that it's only part-time. That's because we continue to get this institutional investment, develop systems, collect data to prove that it's working. So we negotiated to get half of the institutional investment for the year. My department's coming up outside of the general fund for the other half of that position, so that we can collect the data, so that we can do the activities and show that, and demonstrate clearly that there's a need for that position.
Should we go back to the senior center now? There is one staffing change an increase, and Kate can talk a little bit about that. She had to do a lot of convincing, because I don't like to hire additional staff unless I absolutely have to.
And we absolutely have to.
And she convinced me that we absolutely have to, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I was speaking to, that senior center office coordinator. You'll see that the receptionist has actually dropped down from 1 to 0.75, and that's because we're gonna be sharing the receptionist with the Adult and Family Services Division, because that is another position that has historically been underfunded. And I did a calculation in terms of wasted salary for social workers covering reception duties. It was about $38,000 this year alone, which would actually cover the cost of a receptionist. So we wanted to make sure that if we were going to give the senior center some advanced administrative help, to actually tie that in with a shared position. There's a couple benefits to sharing that position, and one of them is breaking down silos. So as I have gone through this department, this is my third position within this department, and I've seen the silos that exist within it, and it's been a really high priority of mine to break down those silos, and I think having a similar face, having a similar background, having consistent procedures, policies, intakes, between our divisions will really help service our clients in a way they haven't seen before. So it's a multifaceted approach here.
Okay. I'm going to move on to page 104, which is Youth, Family, and Recreation Services. We do show the former budget for recreation on the bottom part of this page, and then we're showing at the top the request and the proposed on the top, so you have a point of comparison rather than just dropping out something. So that's why it's split into two different boxes for this year and probably a few years until we get into the current years in the columns to catch up. Issues?
Do you guys have any questions about that one? I think that one's probably our most straightforward. It has the least number of changes, other than, of course, that recreation maintainers piece being moved. But that happened in the previous fiscal year, and I think we, with the help of our division head, Aaron Hagan, have really been able to have a smooth merger between these two divisions.
Okay. We'll move on then to page 1, where the numbers are on page 108, for the administration and Adult and Family Services Division.
Yeah, so you'll see here, one major difference is the Adult and Family Services Manager going on to the general fund. So the ARPA funding will run out for that position, and going back to the theme of institutional investment, we've already been able to demonstrate the need for that position. I think it was actually demonstrated before I came into this role, but now that we've had Haiti Mercedes in that position, I've been able to do some of the things that I talked about being a priority for our department, and I would not have the capacity to do any of that work were I also having to be Adult and Family Services Manager. Those two positions are absolutely both more than full-time, and Leanne Combs is a saint for doing both for so long, but it was at the detriment of our department, and we're in desperate need of some institutional investment here.
Okay, we'll take any questions you might have.
Members? Alderman Singh.
Thank you very much for being here. Can you elaborate some of the grant money that been used to create a little more cultural competency within the city that your department is doing? And which program we are using to do that work? in
Yeah.
Connecticut, in Norwich, yeah.
Absolutely, thank you for that. That's a multifaceted answer. In terms of our adult and family division, we made it a point before the city decided to convert our home pages into Spanish and Haitian Creole. And then we also had our charity tracker system updated with multiple languages. So I think we have 120 languages available in charity tracker. We had our My Senior Center updated so that when clients come in and they scan into the senior center, if they've registered with us as a member and identified their home language, then when they scan in, everything will populate in their home language. We've had same situation for Civic Rec too. I think it's 75 languages for Civic Rec. And so in terms of camp registration, that's exponentially more accessible to families now. In terms of specific programs for cultural competency, as you know, you are a gracious host for our Norwich Prevention Council's cultural competency outreach program. So we have a Norwich Prevention Council within our Youth and Family Division that's funded by a CDC grant, and Hannah is our prevention coordinator here. And she's in charge of making sure that the outreach efforts we do when talking to youth and their families about prevention are culturally competent. That's actually a priority of the CDC funding this grant. And so we have built this great partnership with Councilman Singh, and his museum is actually hosting our cultural competency series. We started, our first host was actually our very own Edie, and she talked about Puerto Rico. Councilman Singh will be talking about your culture and the entire history, tour of the museum, I hope, too.
Sure.
Yes. So we're going to be learning about Sikhism, and then we're going to continue to grow. We're always inviting engaged, interested community members to participate with us, but it's specifically through a public health lens. And in terms of other public health efforts, I am the staff person for the Health Equity Committee now, and so I'm learning a lot from our leaders in the city about health disparities and how my department specifically can help address those in a culturally competent way. So we have specific programs, we have specific interventions, technological advancements. We're trying to have a multifaceted approach to improved cultural competency and targeted, diverse engagement.
Thank you. And my only request or suggestion is that maybe somebody should also coordinate with Global City Norwich new director, and that way there is more kind of connection between everyone, and that will, I think, build up your program a little better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions at this time? President Pro Tem.
Hi, Kate.
Hi.
Same question I asked everybody else. If we held you to a 2.5% increase over your current projected budget, that would be about a $43,000 cut from what's proposed by the city manager. How would that impact your divisions in your department as a whole?
I think that would pretty much wipe out my vision for administrative infrastructure. So quite frankly, I think it would be devastating. We're not asking for a super huge increase, and I think that after a year, you'll see a return on that investment. It's absolutely my intent to make the services we provide improve economic development for the city, increase household wages, increase the tax base for the city. I look at the services we provide not just through a social work lens, but also economic development lens. And so I think that it's really important that you guys trust my vision and my ability to have that return on investment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Any
thank
other
you.
members? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, that concludes this evening's hearings. We meet again on Monday, April 10th, where we'll have police, public utilities, and planning and neighborhood services. And then on Tuesday of next week, we'll have the various fire departments. So we'll have a busy week next week, I'm sure. Thank you for your
Thank you.
attention.